The green room's silence after the last confrontation still lingers. The echo of broken pride and unexpected truth hanging in the air like incense that refuses to dissipate. Cameras may have been turned off, but the momentum they unleashed flows directly into the next night where the set is rebuilt, the audience gathered, and faces lean forward, restless to see if the tension will break or deepen. Jonathan Roumie sits as before, but now his silence is heavier. A calm forged not by ease but by the weight of what has already been spoken and what still presses to be revealed. Ted Cruz enters with the same careful grooming, his tie tightened, his composure rehearsed, but underneath the thin veneer there is something fractured. The man who once dominated every exchange now carries the look of one who has already glimpsed his undoing, though he struggles to hide it from the crowd. The narration lingers on their contrasts, Roumie in quiet prayer, Cruz pacing with restless energy, drawing out the imbalance that has begun to tilt. Maria Bartiromo greets the audience with practiced brightness, but her tone falters when she turns to Roumie, sensing the studio is again a stage for something beyond news and politics. The first words spoken shatter the polite rhythm. 3 months ago, I heard his voice. The line slices through the air, turning every head, silencing every cough, drawing even the cameramen into reverent stillness. Cruz stiffens, eyes darting, aware the sentence is aimed not at the audience but at him. The narration deepens with backstory, the actor who became more than actor, who blurred the boundary between role and reality, until what he carried inside was no longer performance but burden. In a single breath, the world is reminded that some truths cannot be ignored or dismissed. Cruz attempts a smile, the reflex of a politician, but it crumbles as his hands betray him with a subtle tremor. The dialogue between them remains sparse yet loaded, every pause a blade. "About me?" he manages to ask, his voice brittle. Jonathan's steady gaze holds him, answering with nothing more than a nod, but in that silence lies more weight than any speech. The audience leans in, the atmosphere electric, until Jonathan breaks it with words that resound louder than any shout. "Jesus named you, Senator." The phrase falls like a verdict, ending the introduction not with noise but with a silence so charged it becomes unbearable, the cliffhanger pulling every heart forward into the unraveling that must follow. The silence after Jonathan's words does not dissipate but thickens, every second stretching as though the studio itself refuses to breathe. Cruz sits rigid, his practiced composure fighting to hold against the tremor that betrays him. The narration drifts backward, drawing threads of memory that stitch his past to this moment. We see him in Senate chambers, voice booming with confidence, dismissing protesters who spoke of inequality, turning their pain into political rhetoric. We hear echoes of his campaigns, where scripture was recited not as devotion, but as currency, words polished into slogans rather than lived truths. Intercut within the narration are shadows of those left behind by his policies. Families separated, workers unheard, communities crushed beneath legislation cloaked in patriotism. These images do not scream but whisper, the silent witnesses of systemic rot now pressing against the edges of this live broadcast. A producer leans toward another, his voice low and astonished. "Did you hear that?" The camera pans slightly, catching Maria's face as her journalistic instinct wrestles with disbelief. "Jonathan, are you saying this message was meant for Senator Cruz?" she asks, her words deliberate, her tone careful, as if each syllable might ignite a fire. Jonathan answers not with flourish but with fragments, each sentence striking like a bell. Dreams, warnings, truth stripped bare. Cruz shifts uncomfortably, his throat tight as he forces out, "What kind of message could he possibly have for me?" His words falter, breaking under the pressure of the moment. Jonathan's voice, low but unwavering, meets the question with an image of faith undone, ambition unmasked, and power revealed as empty when measured against eternity. The narration lingers on Cruz's hands, the way his fingers claw at the armrest, sweat beading across his brow despite the studio's cool air. The imbalance of power is visible, the senator shrinking as the actor, now prophet, holds the ground without raising his tone. Another voice drifts from the back of the room, a reporter murmuring almost to himself, "This isn't politics anymore." The remark ripples through the crew, shifting the atmosphere from spectacle to witness, the sense that history is no longer being reported but made. Cruz's breath comes uneven now, each inhale sharp, each exhale trembling. He leans forward, eyes locked on Jonathan with desperation that betrays the man who once believed he could control every narrative. His whisper cuts through the silence, a plea more than a question. "What did he say about me?" The question lingers in the air like a live wire, and Jonathan does not rush to answer. His pause is deliberate, the silence weighted heavier than any words yet spoken. When he finally speaks, his tone is calm, surgical, as though cutting away every layer of pretense Cruz has built around himself. "The message," he says evenly, "is that you must leave behind everything you have clung to, your seat, your ambition, your claim to power." The words fall like stones into still water, their ripples spreading through every corner of the studio. Cruz's jaw tightens, his composure fracturing as his eyes dart toward the cameras, as if looking for escape. The narration lingers, pulling the reader into the crumbling fortress of his confidence, showing a man who once wielded words like weapons, now left defenseless before truth. His lips part, voice cracking, "No, I've served him my whole life." The interruption comes swift, Jonathan's reply not loud but sharp as a blade. "You've served yourself, Senator. Now you must serve him." The crowd stirs, gasps audible, the tension no longer contained by professional silence. The narration captures the tremor of Cruz's hands, the beads of sweat that slide down his temple, the pallor draining from his face, as though each word siphons away the illusion of control. Maria leans forward, eyes wide, her voice trembling. "Senator, are you all right?" But he does not answer. He stares at Jonathan, eyes wide, face a map of disbelief and fear. Jonathan presses on, his voice steady, almost compassionate. "He said you mistake influence for obedience, power for faith. But obedience requires surrender." The words land like hammer strikes, the soundless aftermath more deafening than any roar. Cruz shakes his head, slowly muttering, This cannot be happening, not me. I built my life on his word." Jonathan's gaze does not waver, his calm a stark contrast to the senator's unraveling. "You built it on your own name," he answers. The narration swells, describing the audience's collective breath held captive, the studio lights glaring like judgment itself, the cameras recording a reckoning not rehearsed, but real. Cruz grips the armrests of his chair, knuckles white, chest rising with shallow breaths. The narration focuses on the slow collapse of his facade, the gradual stripping of armor until only frailty remains visible. And then it happens, the breaking point. Cruz's eyes roll back slightly. His body convulses with the strain of holding too much, and he collapses forward onto the desk. Gasps tear through the audience. Maria's voice shouts, "We need help." Crew members rush, wires clatter, chaos erupts. But in the middle of it all, Jonathan moves without panic. He kneels beside the fallen senator, placing a hand gently on his shoulder, his face calm, as though he has been expecting this moment all along. The narration slows, drawing out the image. Cruz, once a figure of political might, reduced to a trembling man crumpled on the floor, the cameras capturing not a scandal, but a soul in collapse. Jonathan's hand steadies him, his words barely audible yet piercing. "This is not your fall, Senator. This is your beginning." The final image holds, the contrast of frenzy all around and the stillness between them, leaving the audience not with spectacle, but with the undeniable weight of spiritual reckoning. The chaos of the studio never truly fades. It only shifts into memory, replayed on endless loops across every screen in America. What was once a performance of certainty has become a testament of collapse, and Cruz cannot escape it. Narration slows into the quiet of his nights, the glow of his phone lighting his pale face as he scrolls through clip after clip of his fainting. Each replay punctuated by cruel captions and dissected by voices that once applauded him. Neighbors who once waved across driveways now lower their gaze, slipping inside with quick excuses. Former allies issue statements clipped and cold, their loyalty dissolved into calculated distance. The man who built his platform on unshakable confidence finds himself surrounded by echoes of shame, his power bleeding out not in scandal but in silence. The narration shows him fumbling for prayer, his words shallow, his hands trembling as though he no longer recognizes the God he invoked so easily in speeches. Then it comes, his daughter's dream, innocent yet undeniable, told with the clarity of a child who cannot invent such detail. The very vision Jonathan foretold unfolds in Caroline's simple recounting of a crowd, a foreign land, and words that flowed from her father's mouth, though she had never heard them. Cruz stares at her in stunned silence, powerless to deny the truth that has followed him home, the prophecy now carried by the one voice he cannot dismiss. The narration drifts outward, showing Jonathan walking away without fanfare, no victory lap, no declaration, only the quiet burden of a messenger who has delivered what was given. He does not bask in triumph, but carries the weight of obedience, his calm dignity amplifying Cruz's unraveling. Poetic justice is revealed not in vengeance but in absence, in the silence that leaves Cruz to wrestle with the faith he once wielded as a weapon, now stripped of its armor and presented as the only path left. The dialogue narrows to a single final exchange, not broadcast but whispered off-camera. Jonathan's voice low yet final. Sometimes surrender is the only way to win. Those words linger, echoing beyond the moment, searing themselves into the conscience of a man who once believed victory was measured in votes and power. The last images unfold like shadows, a community beginning to murmur questions about leaders they once idolized, a system rattled, though not yet broken, and Cruz himself alone in the dim light, sitting with his conscience, replaying the voice he can no longer ignore. The story closes not with noise, but with the ache of inevitability, the ripple of truth extending outward, leaving every witness unsettled, aware that collapse was only the beginning of a reckoning still to come.